Elvis Presley, the king of rock and roll, found himself in a strange twist of fate. What started as an unstoppable force in music was now facing an unexpected hurdle: army life in Germany. It was 1958, and Elvis was not just any soldier, he was Elvis Presley, and his presence caused quite a stir. Riots broke out in German cities like Berlin, Hamburg, and Essen as fans went wild for him. The situation was so chaotic that Elvis considered skipping some of his scheduled performances due to lack of security. Elvis, sporting his army uniform, visited Haley and his Comets backstage in Wiesbaden and Mannheim. He expressed his boredom with army life and even joked about joining them on stage for a performance of Shake, Rattle, and Roll, but the police were not amused. They feared another riot if he went through with it. This was just the beginning of Elvis's struggle to balance his rock and roll star status with military discipline. Meanwhile, Colonel Parker, Elvis's manager, had other ideas. He wanted to portray Elvis in a positive light, focusing on his work helping the disabled. A magazine shoot was planned, featuring a pretty girl to make Elvis look relatable to his fans. Enter 16-year-old Margit, a typist who became Elvis's temporary fling. What Elvis and the public didn't know was that Margit had an abortion, a secret that would stay hidden for years. Elvis left behind the comforts of home to serve in an army tent near the Czechoslovakia border. It was a far cry from home, and he wasn't far from Soviet territory. One officer gave him Dexedrine to stay awake on guard duty, potentially his first encounter with drugs, though some say it was his mother's slimming pills. Elvis's appetite for excess was already evident, as he soon started using a quart pot of Dexy's Midnight Runners. By November 27, 1958, Elvis had risen to the rank of Private First Class. Despite the harsh conditions at the Grafenwohr training camp, he maintained his image, thanks to his team who kept his boots shiny and his uniforms pressed. Living in a house surrounded by a picket fence in Wiesbaden, Elvis had his own share of female companions, including Elizabeth Stefaniak, who helped manage his fan mail. Elvis called her Miss Postage Stamp. Elvis's life took another unusual turn when he turned down an invitation to entertain troops with Bob Hope over Christmas. Instead, he focused on his feelings for Gladys. He even wrote to Anita Wood and sent her a poodle, promising to marry her upon his return, but Elvis's promises were often empty. In a bizarre turn of events, country singer Bobby Bare wrote and recorded a parody of Elvis's induction into the Army, All American Boy, under a pseudonym. The song became a hit, reaching number 2 on the US charts, while Elvis remained largely unaware of the mockery. Dick Clark's American Bandstand featured a live call-in with Elvis on his 24th birthday, showing that even in the Army, his star power couldn't be contained. But back in Germany, personal troubles loomed. Elizabeth and Vernon Stanley, both connected to Elvis, were involved in a complicated situation that left Elvis feeling betrayed. Elizabeth, who was both his secretary and girlfriend, had a close relationship with Rex Mansfield, which eventually led to their marriage, cutting Elvis out of their lives. The British Army's experiment with recruiting rock stars like Terry Dene backfired miserably, leading to a press release from Colonel Parker that tried to paint Elvis's army life as fine. Meanwhile, Elvis himself was struggling with the Army's mundane tasks and his own desires. In a moment of desperation, he nearly died from carbon monoxide fumes while trying to heat his tank. As Elvis's army life continued, it became clear that being the king of rock and roll and a soldier were not compatible roles. His behavior and actions raised more questions than answers, leaving fans and the military alike wondering what the future held for the legendary Elvis Presley. In 1959, Elvis Presley found himself in a bit of a pickle. People back home were wondering where he was after he fell ill with tonsillitis. The NME, a popular music newspaper, even printed a big headline saying, "Presley vanishes." But Elvis wasn't just sitting around doing nothing. He snuck out of the country to Paris, flying in a fancy plane with his friend Charlie Hodge and a few other buddies. Once in Paris, Elvis hit the town hard. He went to a cool nightclub called the Lido. There he met two funny guys, George and Bert Bernard, who used to be in a comedy act. These guys liked to pretend they were famous movie stars, Yul Brynner and Deborah Kerr, in their shows. One night after the club closed, Elvis surprised everyone by sitting at the piano and singing songs like "Willow Weep for Me." The staff at the club loved it. During their 10 days in Paris, Elvis and his friends explored a lot. They visited famous places like the Folies Berger, Café de Paris, and the Moulin Rouge. At one place called the 4 O'Clock Club, they even took a whole group of dancers back to their hotel. It was a wild time, but Elvis wasn't just partying all the time. He started learning karate, though he didn't visit the famous art museum, the Louvre, with his friends from Memphis. Elvis and his friends had some fun adventures too. There was a special encounter with a contortionist in a place called Frankfurt. Elvis spent hours with her, and when he came out, he was pretty wet, according to his friend Lamar. Elvis also arranged for a girl for his friend Lamar, but it turned out the girl was a transvestite, which was a surprise. Despite all the fun, Elvis almost missed an important deadline. He had to get back to the United States, but he was having too much fun. To make sure he made it back on time, he hired a fancy Cadillac and paid $800 for it. That was a lot of money back then. Back in Germany, Elvis continued to enjoy himself. He even had a special meeting with a young girl named Priscilla Beaulieu. Priscilla was only 14, but she was curious about the famous Elvis. Her friend Curry Grant, whose wife was Tony Bennett's sister, often took her to meet Elvis. Curry would get Priscilla to meet Elvis first, but he made sure to keep his distance after she met the star. Priscilla was fascinated by Elvis. When she met him, he was playing songs like Sweet Nothings and Rags to Riches. Elvis was impressed by Priscilla, especially her resemblance to his mom, Gladys, and his own looks. He even invited her to his bedroom, but he was careful not to take advantage of her age. Priscilla later wrote that his kisses made her feel excited, but that he never went too far. Priscilla and Elvis started seeing each other often, sometimes 3 or 4 times a week. Elvis even helped Priscilla with her schoolwork when it got tough, suggesting she take some medicine called Benzedrine to help her focus. It wasn't a great solution, but it helped for a while. While Elvis was having fun in Paris, the movie world was watching him closely. A man named Hal Wallis, who made movies, came to talk to Elvis about his first movie after the army. The movie, called GI Blues, would be based on Elvis's time in the army, with some scenes filmed in Germany. But Elvis would have a stand-in for these scenes to avoid any confusion. Wallis also talked about other movie ideas, like a western called Rodeo and a film about a Mississippi gambler. Elvis agreed to these projects, but he knew his real life was far more exciting than anything Hollywood could create. Meanwhile, fans in Yorkshire were so excited about Elvis that they wrote a petition asking him to give a concert in the UK. There were even rumors he might perform in a big event called the Royal Variety Performance, but Colonel Parker, Elvis's manager, would never say yes to that kind of charity show. Despite all the attention and fun, Elvis had to think about his future. He was still in the army, and his time was limited. But for now, he enjoyed every moment in Paris, making memories and creating music that would stay with people for years to come. In the final chapter of Elvis's military journey, we see a man caught between his newfound freedom and the responsibilities of being a soldier. The story we've explored reveals a lot about Elvis, the man, and the times he lived in. Let's wrap up this narrative with some thoughts on his behavior and the era's attitudes towards sex and discipline. Elvis's time in Germany was marked by a mix of excitement and recklessness. The allure of a young woman like Priscilla, combined with the freedom away from home, led him down a path filled with temptation. His actions, from fake illnesses to secret meetings, show a young man testing boundaries. It's important to remember that Elvis was young, only 24, and in an environment where discipline seemed loose. This was a different time where the military's grip on soldiers, especially those as famous as Elvis, wasn't as tight as it is today. Sexual behavior in the 1950s was a topic shrouded in secrecy and shame for many, but for someone like Elvis, it was an open book. The Kinsey reports, published a few years earlier, opened eyes to the reality of male sexuality. These studies showed that most men had desires and acted on them, often in secret. Elvis, like many, was likely influenced by this reality. His treatment of Priscilla, oscillating between wanting to wait and giving in, reflects the internal struggle many faced then. He saw her as both a nice girl to be protected and a plaything to enjoy. This duality was common, shaped by societal norms that viewed women differently depending on their status. The military, while supposed to uphold strict discipline, often turned a blind eye to the personal lives of high-profile soldiers like Elvis. Colonel Parker, Elvis's manager, likely played a big role in keeping things under control, ensuring that Elvis's indiscretions didn't become public scandals that could harm his career. It's a reminder of how power dynamics can influence rules and consequences. Elvis's return to the United States marked a transition from soldier to star, but also from a carefree young man to someone facing the realities of fame and responsibility. The press conference upon his return was a pivotal moment. Here, Elvis was still the charming, modest soldier, but the mask was starting to crack. His early discharge, coming nearly 3 weeks ahead of schedule, hinted at the special treatment he received. It raises questions about the true cost of celebrity and the compromises made along the way. In the end, Elvis's story from this period teaches us about the complexities of human nature, the allure of freedom, and the impact of societal attitudes on personal choices. It's a reminder that even icons, those we elevate to larger-than-life status, are still human, with all the flaws and contradictions that come with being human. As we look back, it's clear that Elvis's journey was not just about music and fame, but about growing up in a world where the lines between right and wrong, especially for those in the public eye, were often blurred. In the years that followed, Elvis would face more scrutiny, but the seeds of his early adventures in Germany planted a legacy of a star who could not be contained, a figure who would forever challenge the norms of his time. His story continues to resonate, a testament to the enduring human struggle between desire, duty, and the pursuit of happiness.